Good afternoon and welcome to the September 14th, 2022 Mesa Planning and Zoning Public Hearing. I am Jeff Crockett, and we will begin with a roll call of our members. Okay, Board Member Crockett is present. Vice Chair Ayers is absent. Board Member Allen.
Here.
Board Member Sarkisian.
Here.
Board Member Peterson.
Here.
Board Member Pitcher.
Here.
And our brand new Board Member Montez.
Here.
Okay, it looks like we have a quorum. We have a consent agenda that we will be reading into the record today and voting on that as a block. If you are here for an item that's on the agenda and you would like to speak, we'll need to get a speaker's slip from you to do that. We have, I have two speaker slips that have come in on agenda item 4E, which is, just make sure we're clear on the record, case ZON 22-00431. So that item is off consent and we will have a presentation on that. But if you're here for any other item and you would like to speak, we need to get quickly a speaker slip for you. The other thing I will do is quickly read into the record a comment we have on one of the consent item agendas. It's case ZON 21-00080 from Art Jordan, 4018 North Pinnacle Hills Circle. He supports this item. His comment is, I have design concerns and request for improved design elements. Primary concerns are wall screening, landscape quality to resemble arterial landscaping at Blandford Development nearby, cleanup and landscaping of buffer property to the west owned by the city of Mesa, landscaping and screening on west property line and south property line, and a few other issues. But again, he is in support, does not wish to speak. So, Board Member Sarkisian, will you proceed with our consent agenda?
Okay, seeing no other items being pulled off, the consent agenda for Wednesday, September 14th, 2022 is as follows. Approval of meeting minutes from the August 24th, 2022 study session and regular meeting. Item 3A, ZON 22-00247, District 6, within the 8100 to 8200 blocks of East Germain Road, located west of Hawes Road on the north side Germain Road, site plan review to allow for industrial development. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 3B, ZON 22-00603, District 6, within the 9800 to 10,000 blocks of East Elliott Road, within the 3600 and 3900 blocks of South Everton Terrace, and within the 3600 to 3900 blocks of Southeast Mark Parkway, located east of Ellsworth Road and south side of Elliott Road, site plan review to allow for industrial development. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 4A, ZON 21-00080, District 5, within the 3600 to 3800 blocks of North Higley Road and the 5200 to 5500 blocks of East Thomas Road, located east of Higley Road on the south side of Thomas, rezoned from single residence 90, RS 90 to light industrial with a planned area development overlay, LIPAD, cancel use permit, and a site plan review. This request will allow for a boat and recreational vehicle storage facility. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4B, ZON 21-00995, District 6, within the 8900 block of East Pecos Road and with the 7200 block of South 89th Place, and within the 8900 block of East Waltham Avenue, located west of Ellsworth Road on the south side of Pecos Road, rezoned from light industrial with a planned area development overlay, LIPAD, to light industrial with a planned area development overlay and bonus intensity zone overlay, LIPAD BIZ, and site plan review to allow for the industrial development. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 4C, ZON 21-01271, District 4. This is actually staff recommendation is continuing to September 28, 2022, Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 4D, ZON 22-00263, District 2. This item is also being continued to the September 28, 2022, Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Item 4F, ZON 22-00607, District 6, within the 7,600 to 8,000 blocks of East Elliott Road, and within the 3,300 to 3,600 blocks of South 80th Street, located east of Southman Road and north of Elliott Road, rezoned from agricultural AG limited commercial LC and single residence 43 RS 43 to light industrial with a planned area development overlay, LIPAD, and site plan review to allow for industrial development. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 4G, ZON 22-00669, District 5, within the 1,200 to 1,300 blocks of North Power Road, located north of Brown Road on the east side of Power Road, rezoned from single residence 35, IRS 35, to public and semi-public district with a planned area development overlay, PSPAD, and site plan review to allow for a public safety facility. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 4H, ZON 22-00677, District 1, with the 3,900 block of East Oasis Circle, and within the 2,800 to 2,900 blocks of North Norfolk, located north of McDowell Road and west of Greenfield Road, for site plan review to allow for industrial development. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4I, ZON 22-00682, District 6, within the 3,700 to 3,900 blocks of South Sauceman Road, located south of Elliott Road on the east side of Sauceman Road, rezoned from light industrial LI to light industrial with a planned area development overlay, LIPAD, council use permit, and site plan review to allow for the expansion of an existing mini storage facility with boat and recreational vehicle storage. Staff recommendation is approval conditions. Item 4J, ZON 22-00924, District 6, within the 37 to 3,900 blocks of South Hawes Road and within the 7,800 blocks of East Elliott Road, located east of Sauceman Road and north of Warner Road, rezoned from small lot single residence 4.0 with a planned area development overlay, RSL 4.0 PAD, to small lot single residence 4.0 with a planned area development overlay, RSL 4.0 PAD. This request will allow for development of single residence subdivision. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. And 5A, item 5A, Grove on Main Street, District 4, within the 0 to 100 blocks of South Mesa Drive, to the 0 to 100 block of South Udall, to the 0 to 100 block of South LaSawyer, located east of Mesa Drive and south of Main Street, preliminary plat. Staff recommendation is approval of conditions. Item 5B, Baseline Logistics Park, District 2, within the 5,600 to 5,800 blocks of East Inverness Road. This item is actually being continued to the September 28th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. And item 5C, Wentworth Mesa, District 6, companion case to ZON 22-00607, within the 7,600 to 8,000 blocks of East Elliott Road and within the 3,300 to 3,600 blocks of South 80th Street, located east of Sauceman Road and north of Elliott Road, preliminary plat, to allow for industrial development, and staff recommendation is approval with conditions, and that is the consent agenda for today.
Thank you. You may have set a new record on that.
Deanna would be proud.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, you've heard the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Let's vote. Okay. Board Member Allen?
Yes.
Okay, by your vote of 6 ayes with 1 absent, you have passed the consent agenda today. Thank you. Rachel, I'll turn it over to you for staff presentations now.
All right, Chair, board members, we have item 4E, which is ZON 00431, and Cassidy will be making a presentation on this item.
Thank you, chairs, members of the board. The case before you this afternoon is case ZON 22-00431. This is a request to rezone the property from planned employment park with a planned area development overlay and council use permit to multiple residence 5 with a planned area development overlay and site plan review. That request will allow for a multiple residence development. The site is located on the north side of Baseline Road and the west side of Sunview Road and west of Power Road. So the general plan designation for this property is currently specialty with a medical campus subtype. The intent behind the specialty medical campus is for large areas with a single use. So because of this medical campus subtype, the intent is to provide a large area that's supportive of medical campus and educational medical campus uses. So per the 2040 Mesa General Plan, there are primary zoning and land uses and secondary zoning and land uses that must be met. So within the specialty district, a minimum 80% of the primary zoning and land uses must be met before secondary land uses can be met. So hospitals, medical offices, clinics, supportive hotel, as well as NC, LC, GC, PEP, and LI are all identified within that primary classification. Multiple residence and supportive commercial and retail is identified as a secondary classification, but the only zoning district within that is the RM4. This request is for an RM5, which is not identified as a secondary land use within the specialty general plan character area designation. When you look at this area in total, there's approximately 254 acres within the specialty classification. Approximately 71 acres are currently developed for those primary land uses, and so that minimum 80% has not been met, and therefore staff is unable to support the request. So the specific zoning that the applicant is requesting is multiple residence 5. The intent behind that multiple residence zoning district is to provide areas for a variety of housing. Again, the requested multiple residence zoning is not consistent with the general plan, nor is it compatible with the surrounding area, and staff is not in support. The site is currently vacant. As we get into the planned area development overlay request, the applicant is requesting some deviations from the RM5 development standards. Those include an increase in the maximum building height, an increase in the maximum building setbacks, some modifications to the landscape yards, a reduction in the required parking ratio, and a reduction in the drive aisle setback. Staff has particular concerns with the reduction of the interior landscape yard setback. The requirement is 15 feet for non-single residence uses adjacent to other non-single residence uses. The proposed site plan shows a reduction down to 10 feet, as well as the reduced parking ratio. However, the applicant has provided a parking study that supports their requested ratio. So the site plan is for 394 units and 4 buildings that are 4 stories each. Primary access to the site will be from Baseline Road with a secondary access off of Inverness Avenue. There is a centralized amenity space in the central area of the site surrounded by those buildings. The applicant did attend Design Review Board work session on September 13th, yesterday evening. The Design Review Board was supportive of the proposed elevations. However, they were made aware of staff's recommendation of denial for the proposed site plan and land use. The applicant did conduct a citizen participation process, which included notification to property owners within 1,000 feet, as well as HOAs and registered neighborhoods. They did conduct 2 neighborhood meetings. At the time this presentation was made and the staff report was written, we did not have the additional letter of support from A.T. Still University that is included in the Planning and Zoning Board packet. So in summary, we find that the proposed development does not comply with the 2040 Mesa General Plan, nor does it meet the criteria for a planned area development overlay and site plan review outlined in chapters 22 and 69, and therefore staff is recommending denial, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Board members, are there questions on this item for Cassidy? Board Member Peterson.
Chair Crockett and Cassidy, can you drill down onto the numbers a little bit, just because the percentages are critical here for the land, the primary and secondary land uses, right? What is the 254 acres, and maybe that's part of the history of what's the denominator we're dealing with? Is it 254, or is it part of a previous PAD, and when was that PAD approved?
Chair, Board Member Peterson, so the 254 acres accounts for the total area within the specialty character area designation.
Okay, so it's a general plan, specialty character. It's not a PAD then.
That's correct. It's not a PAD. It's the entire area within the blue that you're seeing on the map.
Okay, gotcha. And so of that, 71 acres has been developed for the primary use to date. Is that correct?
Chair, Board Member Peterson, that is correct. 71 acres has been developed for the primary land uses as defined in the Mesa 2040 General Plan. An additional 54 acres is anticipated to the north of the subject site.
And that 54 is one of the cases that got continued that you're referring to, and that fits within the primary uses?
That's correct.
Okay. So then on the trigger for the minimum 80% for primary before you can, so the other multifamily uses within that blue zone that have developed already, those were part of that 20% allowance, or is that, maybe give some history on that?
Chair, Board Member Peterson, so the percentages were a part of a recent amendment that was made to the 2040 Mesa General Plan Amendment. These multiple residences were actually developed prior to that 2040 Mesa General Plan in 2014.
Okay, so the criteria for the 80% threshold was part of the 2040 general plan?
It was a part of a recent amendment that was made in 2020.
Okay, I guess where I'm trying to get is the 254 that includes these things that were before the rule got put into place, how do those fit, if they're part of the 254, but now they're not part of it? I guess I'm just trying to cut to what acreage that there is and what's left, because is the 254 left to be developed, or those multifamily parcels are part of the 254, right?
The multiple residence developments that exist would be inclusive in the 254 acres. So if you're looking at total percentages, they would count towards that 20% of secondary land uses.
But even though they're approved before the rule that restricts the 20% came in?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note that, while the percentages are critical, as discussed in the study session, Chapter 5 of the general plan identifies the maintenance and preservation of commercial areas. And so these areas are currently zoned planned employment parks, so they could develop for commercial and employment uses. And it's the goal of the general plan to support those employment uses within the city. And so when you take into account the existing multiple residence that's already been there, we want to make sure that we're maintaining and preserving any additional viable areas for those commercial and employment uses.
Okay, well said. And then just to clarify, the case that was continued, the additional 54 acres, what types of uses are proposed on that fit within the primary category? Like specifically what?
Chair, Board Member Peterson, so there is a request to rezone that property from PEP PAD to LIPED PAD and PEP PAD. So it's a mixture of large-scale and small-scale industrial buildings, and the applicant is actually working with staff on a development agreement that would place some limitations on land uses to encourage medical manufacturing uses that are more consistent with the medical campus subtype.
Okay, so it's industrial type uses that, but they're trying to target those to the medical.
Correct.
Yeah, Chair and board members, as well as research and development space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Cassidy? Don't see any, so I'd like to invite the applicant up now. And if you would please state your,
She loaded it first, so let's see. Give me 1 second, please.
no, take your time. We saved some time with Board Member Sarkissian's quick reading of the consent
It's
agenda.
impressive.
Yeah, if you'd please state your name and
Charles
business
Female for the
address.
record. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's good to see most of you again and welcome as a new member. You may regret by the end of this evening having accepted those responsibilities, but until then, welcome. I think you pointed out the first point, which is the easy cases are gone, and this is the reason for the commission to decide the cases that aren't so easy. This is one of those cases. We've had an opportunity to work with your staff for quite some time, and frankly, we respectfully disagree. And so you'll hear a very different presentation from us than you did from staff. I have a presentation prepared. As these things go, they change a bit because we have the advantage of hearing what you discussed in the study session, which likewise is the purpose for the study session. So I may jump around a little bit based on hearing some of the things in the study session. The thing that I heard that I think was probably most relevant is staff's acknowledgement that the real issue is that they don't like multifamily. And I guess that doesn't really come as a surprise, but I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about that because it's important to the core of the case, really. I suspect everyone knows well the site. You've heard at least twice from staff. I'd like to talk a little bit about the site. A big part of our case relies on the fact that to the right of us on the screen is AT Still campus. And they have been in Mesa for a long time. I think some of the discussion, one of the questions earlier was, what are the buildings to the east of us? And that entire area is the AT Still campus. And we have spent quite a bit of time talking with them. I hope that you've had a chance to see the letter in the packet. They come in strong support of housing. And they do so very clearly because when they came to Mesa, they came because it was going to be a campus. It came a long time ago. Somebody mentioned earlier in the hearing or in the study session, when was this case? It was 2008. And every morning I like to think that I'm every bit the same person I was in 2008. And then I get up and I go for a run and I realize I'm not. A lot has happened since 2008. And times change. Things have changed dramatically since then. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. One of the dreams that Mesa had in 2008, and one of the reasons we come here with this zoning, is because at that point in time, Mesa wanted a hospital campus. And the simple reality is they have one and they don't. They have one, but it's not the one that they had hoped for. Banner has built a significant campus, and Tenet Healthcare is not in the business of competing against a business that's already serving its patient base. There isn't room for another campus. And Tenet has been very clear about that. And I'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. But AT Still came because it was going to be a medical campus. And they have fulfilled their portion of that dream. They have brought many students as well as faculty to Mesa, and their letter clearly indicates in all of their conversations with us that they plan to have that campus. In fact, you may or may not know, I didn't know before the start of this case, that's why the Y is there. Rather than building their own separate piece, they worked together to build the Y because they wanted it to be a campus feel, and it works for everyone. The Y gets the opportunity to have a good place to be, and AT Still doesn't have to repeat those amenities. If you go to, for example, Arizona State, you're going to find a student rec center, and that serves just the students and the faculty. And just down the block, there are several gyms. Because this was a campus, that's not the way AT Still proceeded. One of their dreams always was to build residential. And in our first meeting with AT Still, we showed them some renderings, and they said, my God, that's almost exactly what we wanted to build, but we weren't able to do it. This is really exciting. We're super excited that you'll be there. And so we worked with them on the site plan and on elevations. It's worth noting, and I'm going to show you some elevations, that the design review board was not silent, as you heard first, but actually very favorable about the project. And we take great pride in the fact that it is a good project, and we're discussing whether or not this is the appropriate place for it. And I know this is not the place for design review, but it's nice to come with such a warm welcome from design review. We would argue that it's exactly the right place, not just because of AT Still, but there's a significant need in this area for housing. And I'm going to kind of bounce around from my original presentation just because I know some of the things that you've talked about. But frankly, the fact that we don't have neighborhood opposition is a really important point. We're going to spend a bunch of time today talking about why we think housing is important. It's important because while Mesa has spent time talking today about the need for preserving employment base, a lot has changed again since 2008. And in 2008, people were happy to take long commutes, and people were happy to go into work every day. In fact, the idea that they wouldn't go into work every day was sort of an anomaly. And we're not in 2008. We are where we are. And since that time, the campus, the medical campus, has occurred. Again, much of it is in Gilbert, not in Mesa. But the theory of the general plan was we would have these uses, and that's why housing is allowed as a secondary use, because quite simply, if you're going to continue to bring new jobs, you have to find places for people to live. And it's hard to find places. I was in the study session in the actual DRB last night, and there was another apartment deal, and there was a lot of friction in that case. And the reason the friction was there in part because they wanted to put apartments in an area that had previously been focused more on single-family homes. And that brings out lots of folks, but you don't see folks like that here today. There's no one here in opposition except staff. And we've had not one, but 2 meetings. And we have AT Still, the nearest university, the nearest neighbor here is in strong support because they need what we're offering, which is a place for their students to live. Their students are there for a while. Especially the good ones are there for only a short period of time, and then they move on. Many of them will move on to this same neighborhood because they'll move towards the campus that Banner has built. Yes, it's in Gilbert, but they're still going to be in the neighborhood, they're still going to use the streets, and there aren't places for them to live. The cost and the vacancy of apartments has been dramatic over the last several years. In this area, if you wanted to live, and there's probably one exception, one of the other projects that is in this planning area is a income restricted project, which means you have to qualify to live there. It's not available to everyone. But if you take the market rate product within miles of this site, it's 97% occupied. And that means it's 100% occupied except for people moving in and out. There are no places for people to rent. There are no places for people to live. This is not a site for single-family homes. It's not a site for hospital uses, and I'll get to that in just a second. But this is a place, and since I showed the slide, let me cut to that piece. In 2008, this is another thing that Mesa was talking about. They were talking about the HEAT initiative. The first 2 parts of HEAT initiative are healthcare and education. That's why AT Still ended up here, because that's what Mesa was talking about. That was the dream they believed in. And we're helping fulfill that dream by letting it be a campus, by letting people live near the school they go to, by letting people work near the place they live. One of the tremendous expenses over the last several years with healthcare has been the need for hospitals to hire people temporarily because people don't want to move there because there aren't places for them to live. And again, as the area, again, I understand the sensitivity of talking about some of it being in Gilbert, but that's the reality. That hospital is built, they spent millions and millions of dollars building it, it's there, and it serves the public. People are not going to just have to go to another hospital across the street because Mesa would rather it be in Mesa. I'm going to jump around here for a second and find... Tenet has been very clear. This is a letter from Tenet Healthcare. You asked this question earlier, and you're absolutely right. Tenet Healthcare is selling pieces of the land, and as they've sold it, including to AT Still has restrictions. Theirs are different than all the others because they're education-based, and they're allowed to do the educational uses that are aligned with healthcare. No surprise, because that helps the healthcare industry. They want those future trained employees. But the other uses are not going to be healthcare. They're simply not. The idea that they're going to be is gone. It's not a public policy issue. It's not something that you can discuss as a city because it's a private property right. But every one of those properties has deed restrictions on it. And I can probably find them. These are some of the deed restrictions, and I'll leave them up, but the deed restrictions that are prohibited on this property are basically everything that would be a competing hospital. Tenet is not going to sell the land and allow someone to come in and use the uses that would compete against what they do. They will build somewhere else in the valley. They're not in the business of creating competition for themselves. So we can pretend to have a discussion about that, but it's not very realistic. And I'm going to move to the next page. It also limits you from selling to anyone who has interest in those kinds of businesses. So it's not going to be healthcare. So now you're left with the discussion about what else can go there, and some of it is light industrial, and you had a discussion even earlier today about that. Well, you probably know AT still is opposed or has been opposed to having industrial. And while I don't speak for that issue, it does sort of bring up the issue that they have brought up with us, which is we want things that are campus oriented. And they've been clear that they don't think light industrial is campus oriented. This is. This helps them get to the thing that they're looking for, which is housing. One of the issues, and I'm going to cover a few things just to make sure that I have an opportunity to address the comments you've made. One of the things that staff brought up was parking too, and I would like to point out, parking is something we could work on. It isn't really the issue. We know the real issue is multifamily. But the way that Mesa calculates its code is similar to many cities, but frankly a bit antiquated, which is it's by unit. So we have 3 bedroom units and we have 1 bedroom units. And so depending on what that mix is, your parking ratio can sound great or terrible. We're at 0.99 per bedroom. So forget the code for a second and just think practically, please. And that means that every bedroom has a parking space, which is more than fair given what real parking ratios are throughout the valley in terms of what people do in terms of having vehicles and having units. If that were the real issue, if parking were the real issue, certainly we would get to the table and try to work through that. As staff pointed out, we have a report that says this is consistent with what happens in the industry and that it works well. Can I have 1 minute to confer with my client? I don't want to take too much time. I know you've seen lots, and I wanted to make sure my client had an opportunity to make sure I covered what was necessary. Be happy to answer questions as you have them.
Sure, thank you for that. And Charles, your last name, pronounce that for me?
I pronounce it Huellmantel. Almost no one else does.
Huellmantel?
Huellmantel.
Huellmantel, okay.
Huellmantel, and I did not pick it. I was born with it. I would have picked something easier.
No, that's great. I just didn't want to.
You say it's great, but you're the last person in school to spell your own name. It's terrible.
That's true.
It's a scar.
All right. So any questions for Charles? We're going to go with your first name on this.
I think
just
that's
so
a wonderful idea. I wouldn't blame you a bit.
Questions from board members on this one for Charles? Board Member Pitcher, please.
I'll quiz you on the legal side of it. Can you put that slide back up about the restrictions?
You bet. This one or the second one?
So who's the hospital owner that has the approval right here?
Tenant Healthcare.
Okay, if you can leave that there, I'm going to look at it, but...
Do you want me to give you a copy of the form?
Yeah, that'd be a whole lot easier.
I figured that might come up. That's in its entirety. I've only pulled sections of it, but you're entitled to keep that. And I'm happy to wait if you have questions for it or come back or however you want to handle it.
And Charles, just while he's looking at that, let me just ask you a question. So this is what you would expect to be given to sign. I mean,
we know that it will be required to be signed.
It will be required of you, okay.
And it has been required of others. So
Gotcha.
it's not unique to our piece. That is what's been required throughout, and I think you'll find that probably on each of the pieces.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
something very similar to it. AT still is slightly different because they're allowed to have medical uses that are associated with education for obvious reasons.
Okay, so while Board Member Pitcher's looking, Board Member Peterson, I think, has a question.
So what is the relationship of tenant with this VHS acquisition subsidiary that owns this and the property to the north?
I'm not an expert on that. I believe it's a holding company for tenant that operates and owns their land holdings.
Oh, so it's, call it
They're related.
a related entity? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if this isn't so much a question for the applicant, or they could answer it, but I'm sure I would prefer staff's answer. So this, The question I have, I believe Cassie touched upon it, with the employment area, the 254 acres, that is the general plan category, correct? Is there a PAD over this property that restricts it to the same degree that you're talking about? I know it's a specialty character area, but she mentioned that was part of the general plan and as opposed to a zoning.
Chair, Board Member
Designation.
Sarkisian, that's correct. The 254 acres is within the specialty character area designation, so it includes multiple properties and different property owners. There's not one planned area development overlay for the 254 acres.
Okay, so for this 254 acres, they've all been developing independently?
That's
kind of
correct.
As they come in, okay.
Can we?
Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just with, and sorry, my head's stuck on these numbers a little bit still, though. So so this specialty character area was approved in what year?
The 2040 Mesa General Plan was approved in 2014.
Okay, so 2014. And a lot of these, the apartments and everything else developed before, I guess when the 80% rule coming in there, when you included all these areas that were already developed with multifamily and with retail along Higley Road, then that looked, and just looking at it, it looks like more than 20%. So it almost says that 20%'s gone until, for this whole area. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Board Member Peterson, I believe it accounts for approximately 17% with the existing multiple residents.
Okay, so that would, and then what about the retail along Higley Road? Is that also part of the 20 or part of the 80?
The retail on Higley Road is actually not within the specialty character area designation.
Okay, gotcha. And is the 80%, is that, I guess, what's how specific or how arbitrary was the 80? Do you know what the history was for the 80%?
As in the genesis behind the 80%?
Correct, yeah.
Chair, board members, Nana P. I'm the Development Services Director. So it's very important for you to look at the intent of the percentages. I think we're getting stuck with the specific numbers. The intent of those primary and secondary ratios was to make sure that the primary dominant use that forms the core character of the designation is really developed, because over time, over the years, what we've experienced in the city is we have a general plan character designation that is intended for specific character defining area. But because we don't define what is supposed to be the major dominant character for the area, we allow the secondary, which is supposed to be accessory, to be developed, and over time, the secondary and accessory takes over the specific intent character of the area. So a couple of years ago, after experiencing that, we came up and discussed that moving forward, we want the dominant character uses to be the defining developed character of the area. And once that is done, then the accessory or the secondary uses can be developed to support it. Either that happens independently, or when there is a proposed development that come in with the ratios to show that the 80% is going to be fulfilled with that development with a 20% as part of that, or the 80% needs to be developed and then later on the 20% can come in. So at the end of the day, we ensure that the dominant character area is actually being developed. So that's really the intent behind the ratio. And in this specific case, one of the major issues here is this is one of the prime areas in the city that is actually left for such a large area to be developed for employment uses. Our support for basically that employment uses is not that we don't recognize the need for multifamily. We do recognize the need. However, there are several other locations in the city that can be developed for residential. In addition, we also look at it on a case-by-case basis, and there's been a couple of cases that has come before you that were zoned, let's say, limited commercial or other employment uses that we believe that actually rezoning it to residential was a right thing to do to really support and energize or revitalize the area. This is one of the areas that we believe that actually taking that employment land for residential is not the right appropriate use at the location. And at the end of the day, it doesn't promote the goal of economic development for the city.
Director, I have a question for you. With the types of deed restrictions that we're looking at here that the owner of the property is putting on it, it seems like that has the potential to thwart the medical campus character of this area. So I guess the way I'm looking at it, if they want to sell their property, they need to maybe get rid of the deed restrictions.
Chair, board members, so that's really a good thing. Unfortunately, none of the staff was aware of even this restriction. We just saw, at least I just saw that. I'm not sure if my staff have even had this conversation. That's one. Number two, the property right now is zone plan employment. So it's when the property owner went through, right now they can go ahead and develop it for non-residential uses that are allowed in the PEP. And I believe when the PEP zoning designation was put on the property, the applicant can answer this question, but I believe this deed restriction was still on the property. And so in addition to even the deed restriction, the site doesn't have to be developed specifically for these medical uses. The alternative to non-medical uses at this location is not residential. There is a large volume or demand for other non-residential uses in the city that this site can actually be looked at or reviewed for those uses as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And Board Member Peterson and then Board Member Pitcher.
Director, thank you for that input. So and I remember in the late 90s when this area first started, the infrastructure first started going in. And so to your point of this is a very high demand area, I fully agree with that, where there's a disconnect is that supply and demand is manifest over time, right? And so here we are 25 years later, and it still has a significant amount of undeveloped area where looking at the other side of Higley Road where Banner and then Anderson, those have all filled out robustly. And even and I even had some personal consulting involvement on the south side of Baseline Road where they thought that same time in the early 2000s, everybody thought everything around here would be medical, but once those pieces kind of fell into place, then as the applicant's representative has said, once pieces fall into place, and so you see on the south side, they started with some medical desires and hospital desires, then it turned into assisted living, and it turned into about, some small percent assisted living, and then the rest retail, which is a very robust retail center. There's certainly demand for that. And so the disconnect is, here we are 25 years later, this is a high demand site, but with the restrictions placed on it, it would seem like, especially over the last 10 years of hyper growth and development, that if there was the demand for the things that we're talking about and limiting for it here, why hasn't that occurred over the last 10 years more than it has?
Chair, Board Member Troy, that's actually a good question. Yeah, but to answer your question, there is a reason why the general plan allows for rezoning and to go through this process. And going through this process, so one of the things we do when projects comes through the city, we review that together with the Economic Development Department, and they are very much aware of the demand in that area. And there are other potential demand that is actually can be developed in the area other than residential. So going back to my response earlier, the alternative for the demand is not residential. There are other, as we talked about, and I know you guys were talking about the existing project right now that is coming through that has not actually come before you, which is still ongoing discussion. So I don't want to really sidetrack us with that discussion. But those are the demands that is actually right now. There's a need for it. And so we have to look at it from the overall demands. Right now, one of the things, there is a lot of demand for non-residential uses in the city of Mesa as well. As you know, we are one of the fastest growing cities. You can see on the agenda a lot of demand. So what we are trying to do is to make sure there is a balanced city. We are balancing where people live and also providing employment for them. So when we get these projects, we look at and review that with economic development. And sometimes we say, yes, this site, there has been vacant, there's been not been that much demand, and we believe that this is an area that we can rezone to, example, residential. But this was one of the sites that we believe there is more demand, and there are other potential uses that if we preserve it, we can obtain those uses.
And Director Apia, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying is even if it's not a medical demand on the property, there are other types of demand that would go there that are consistent with the existing zoning on the
PAP,
property.
absolutely,
The PAD.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that, thank you, that follows my question is, in reviewing the restrictions, it looks like they're hospital-related and, emergency, related kind of uses. So are there some uses that you feel are going to be separate from those that are restricted, that are interested in this
I
project?
haven't seen the deed restriction, so I really don't know. But there are so many in the planned employment park. There are so many other uses that are non-medical related.
Board Member Sarkisian.
So I have a question. Being that this has been in an area that you're targeting and stuff like that for this type like growth, and because it's a high employment area, does this site within an opportunity or incentive zone?
I don't know if it's in an opportunity zone.
And so that's a little bit of my concern, whether this gets pushed back and stalls to see what happens. But I think that's my concern, is that I have personally driven past this on the freeway since 2003 when Atwell went in. And I'm looking at historic aerials, and, the second building for Atwell went in 2004-ish. The road to get through was done in 2007. The YMCA was done in 2010. And the parcels that we're talking about have continued to sit. And while, when I know we've denied projects before waiting for other things to come through, and then nothing happens. And so I'm just wondering, at what time do we open it up to other things if it's not going to be? Because I know there's been, like, Banner has exploded on that side, and they've had issues with not enough housing because they want the higher
Anderson? Or
the higher quality for doctors and stuff like that. I don't know if this one is specifically geared towards the doctors or more to the students, but regardless, I know there's a housing shortage issue, but I'm kind of tossed, because I was like, you want to wait for the better, you're waiting for the better, but you don't have the better in front of you. But then on the other side, you also have an issue of, this is what's in front of us at this time, and what are we trying to do? Because you mentioned like that project at the south, in Gilbert on the south side. I did that. I worked with that on that project, and that was 60 acres of regional, and that was set for office, employment type uses, and it became assistant to the medical, which was the assisted living, the memory care, nursing home, and then also came with it the hotels to assist the Banner. And then it came the commercial to assist all the other stuff. So it's like they feed off of each other. But the other thing is, because we're so good right now at the industrial off of Elliott and the Mesa Gateway, I don't know if that's pulling those high-tech R&D stuff that way versus and I don't know if it's kind of pulling it away from this area. And I don't know, chicken or egg, like what's gonna, it's kind of like, what do you wait for, or would you I don't know. Especially since it doesn't have an opportunity zone on it, makes me a little more hesitant to say, let's wait, let's keep this like it is.
Chair, board members, so what staff is recommending is not to wait and keep it idle till something comes up. This is something that we deal with it daily for all the employment or commercial designated land uses. The consistent comments or consistent argument that comes up when they come to rezone it is it's been idle for so many years, and so we want to basically rezone it to residential. That's daily conversations. If we go that route, we will be rezoning all or majority of our employment land uses that can be converted to residential. What we are saying is this is a land that is preserved for employment, and as a city, there are examples of places that, you know, we started and the city basically stood and said, we still want to preserve this for employment uses. And after 10 years, it's come back and has been developed for employment uses. On the contrary, there's been other places that had been preserved for employment uses. And in the most recent years, we've rezoned them from, you know, light industrial to residential, because we believe that of all the things that have been developed around with the retail, with the, you know, restaurants and all that, there's one example around that I wouldn't mention that you guys actually recommended approval last year. It was zoned for light industrial, but the surrounding developments were commercial, restaurants, and we believe that rezoning the light industrial actually to residential was going to help provide the foot traffic to support the restaurants and other uses. Looking at this site, this is one of the sites that staff believe that it needs to be rezoned to residential.
Well, thank you. Any other questions for Director Apia? All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Board Member Pitcher, did you have anything more for the applicant? No? No? Anything else? Board Member Allen?
No, not for the applicant or staff.
Okay.
I'd like to respond to those comments, but I think it would make more sense to open to public comment first and then
Okay.
to allow me to respond after.
Okay, absolutely. So I have one speaker slip that is by former council member Richens. So I'd invite him to the podium and state your name and address for the record,
Dave
please.
Richens, 833 West 11th Place. I didn't realize I'd feel a certain amount of PTSD coming back at this building. I was rather surprised, like, oh, spent way too much of my life in this room. I was there when we did this general plan in 2014. If you open the book, you'll see my name there on the first page. And I've heard a lot of banter by folks who were not here during that period about what we intended by that general plan. One of the things that I heard was that, you know, the intent of the general plan is to preserve these job-producing uses, and I'm going to say, if you look at the general plan on the title of almost every page, it says the goal of the general plan was to create recognizable neighborhoods, innovative jobs, and memorable public spaces. That's it. And so, what are we trying to accomplish here? That's what this whole case is really hinging on. There is a solution to this, and it lies within a subtype in the general plan. So when we had our subtypes that you see in the blue, they're calling it a medical subtype. There's an additional subtype within the general plan called the educational campus. It's on page 7-30. And on page 7-30, it'll talk about that campus subtype, and that residential uses are absolutely an accessory use to that. And so part of the solution of this site as it transitions is to look at it a little different and allow it to evolve. I think Board Member Sarkissian put it very well. She's been by this site for a number of years. She's seen it stay vacant. And this zoning case that happened in 2007, 2008, things have changed considerably. The economy has changed. We've been through a pandemic. We've been through a boom period. Now we're into major inflation. So as things evolve, we need to evolve as a city. And a general plan is exactly that. It's general. But within that general plan, we're given latitude to change our mind a little bit. Now, this 80-20 ratio that was created in 2020, only a bureaucrat could come up with that. And I listened with intent to the planning director, and all due respect to the planning director, I tried to unravel that in my mind about why you'd have this 80-20 ratio and why that's so important. But to me, a general plan shouldn't even be that specific. It really is trying to create three things: the innovative neighborhoods, let me find my note again. The recognizable neighborhoods, innovative jobs, and memorable public spaces. And this project, I came just because I felt upset about the general plan characterization in this case. And I love A.T. Still University. We worked really hard on city council during that period to bring educational uses here. And if you walk outside the backside of this building, and if you keep walking towards City Hall, you're gonna run into ASU. And if you walk down the street a little bit more, you're going to run into Benedictine. And if you think about all these different things that have developed here, we need to preserve these educational uses. And I worry about AT Still. They may not go anywhere, but they may cease their expansion. The staff report does not mention AT Still once. Now, to me, that's very concerning. It shows me what they value. They valued more getting wrapped around the axle about 80-20 ratios than a major educational institution that's churning out the doctors that are employed next door at Banner in the general plan. And when you're looking at those ratios, we count 271 acres. If you were to count the rest of the acreage into Gilbert, which is what this whole totality of the area would take in, then that whole 80-20 thing is like, okay, yeah, we have a preponderance of medical uses here. So I think you have the latitude within changing your mind a little bit, saying, hey, this is a great place for residential. AT still supports this. I am sure if had we approached Banner, Banner would love to have some high-end housing for their nurses and employees. He flashed past the picture kind of quick of the doctor sleeping in the hallways at some of those hospitals. I've seen that myself happen. I'm sure you guys have too. Let's be a little flexible here. Let's understand that the general plan provides latitude to allow a great project to come to Mesa. I'd hope you vote for it. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments on that. Okay, so Charles, did you want to have the final word here?
I do. I hope the final word is the vote, and I wish I could take that myself as well. But at least the final comments, we disagree respectfully with staff on what this means. We disagree particularly whether the general plan should be the zoning case or the zoning case should be the zoning case. But really what we disagree with, and you asked the question kind of the chicken or the egg, I'm not even sure it's that anymore, because I think we're at the point where we're not going to continue to get the jobs we want if we don't have places to house people. They're not going to continue to get the students they want at AT Still if they can't find places for their students to live, because they're coming from other places. We in Arizona have worked really hard over the last decade and more to broaden our economy, to make it not just about development, to bring jobs and industry in from other places. And you know what? One of the things that we benefited from the most was California. Not because they were necessarily doing it right, but because they made it too expensive and too difficult, and people had to live too far from their jobs. And people changed in that time. They wanted to live close to their jobs, particularly people who are working at a hospital and are working shifts from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. or whenever it is, all kinds of odd hours, and tired when they get home. And people don't want to drive 45 minutes anymore, and we shouldn't want that either. It's not good for the roads. It's not good for the environment. We should be designing campuses with people in mind. And if you're going to put people in mind, they have to have a place that they can live. And if we can continue to say, yeah, we think there's a housing problem, but somebody else should solve it, it should be somewhere else, not near here, it's not really solving the problem. And this case, getting back to specifically what it is, does solve a specific problem. It takes land, and yeah, you could put some other uses in there. There's a ton of fast food restaurants out there. We can, Popeyes is already there, but maybe we can get all their competitors out there, and you can fill up this land on Baseline with 30 more fast food restaurants and take the land up. To me, that's not great. That doesn't increase the feel of a campus for AT Still. It doesn't increase the job quality of life for people who work at Banner or for any of the remaining land uses. To me, having residential uses really helps you get the rest of the land available for jobs that are good jobs that people can afford to live by. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate that this is a tough case, but we really feel strongly that this is the right project, and that's noted not only by the kind words from the Design Review Board, but also the fact that you have no opposition. It's so rare anymore to find a piece of land that doesn't have opposition, but this one has support. And Councilman Richens pointed out, and I can probably even find you that piece of the code, even in the general plan, and again, I would argue that it's a general plan, not a zoning case. I think the law would support that. But even then, there are secondary uses, and those secondary uses were always designed to be residential. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you for that. I'll just make a comment, Charles. And earlier you said that staff doesn't like apartments, and since I've been on P&Z for I think about 4 years now, we've approved a lot of apartment projects or multi-housing projects. So I don't
I'm
think.
happy to refine my statement if I said it wrong. What I heard in the SURE session was the real issue is multifamily.
Okay, and it's not an antagonism toward multifamily projects. It's really, is this the right project in the right place? And so
Just
that's what-
relating it to this case, I'm not willing to speak to a larger picture.
Sure, okay, I understand that and appreciate your presentation. That's certainly helped me understand much better, what we're talking about today. So any other questions for the board or from the board? Any discussion on this item that you'd like to have? Board Member Montez.
It's okay. Can you tell me how many students attend the university?
I can't tell you the exact number. There may be a representative here who can tell you. I can tell you that the university breaks down, though, into a way that would make that somewhat misleading. The university has students on campus. In fact, they have some clinics and other things. And they also run similar clinics in lots of other places. So even if I gave you the real number, which I think the thing you really want to know is how many students or participate in that campus. And I think it's a few thousand at least.
Okay.
Okay, well,
They also have plans for continued growth.
okay, so we have an item on our agenda with a recommendation. Do I have a motion on this?
Hey, excuse me, Chair Crockett, you need to close the public hearing first.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you for that. Keep me on my toes here. So any other discussion before we maybe consider a
Yes.
motion on this item?
If I could,
Board Member
take a moment just to, I guess, share my thoughts on this project. Given my background, obviously, with economic development and being part of a city staff for 30 years, I have a tendency, and I'm leaning towards supporting staff and their recommendation, only because I was there when AT Steel came in and I watched that development go, everything develop around it. And I know that was an employment center. And we tried to maintain that, and I fall back to the economic development staff, that they know what they're doing and their recruitment, efforts. And so I'm leaning to support towards recommending denial, or at least supporting the denial recommendation.
Thank you for that. Board Member Peterson.
Yeah, just some thoughts on this, and from a baseline of staff recommendations, I have a lot of respect for and put a lot of credence in the staff recommendations. In this particular case, and in the late 90s, I lived just on the north side of the freeway here, so I'm very familiar with it and have watched it grow up over the years. I do see that when I pull back, half a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles in my little SimCity mind and say, what's good planning here? The case before us, it feels like good planning. It feels like a good mix. When I go to this 80-20 mix, which I get it, it's a number, whether it's arbitrary or not, and this site is at 10 acres. That's 4% of the area. If 17% is already secondary, another 4% is 21, call it 20. It's within that range of that balance that the general plan's seeking, although it might not be in the exact, this comes before that. And then the bigger thing is just the time factor of supply and demand on development and what's coming in. If economic development had such high demand for this, why have we gone 25 years, and particularly the last 10 years, of hyper employment related growth and not had more go on here? And I get there's a case for a large parcel, and that's great, coming before us here in the near future. Sounds like even that's more industrial, which is call it the gray area of, I think, what we're talking about here. I would guess that's not economic development's first wish that would go in here. And then seeing how the hospital campus is developed in all directions in this area, and the support that is needed, not just general population-wise with the shortage of housing, but specific to the hospital for longer-term stays for patients' relatives, medical workers, students at the university there. To me, it feels like it's a good planning thing to do, and so for that reason, I would be in support of recommendation for approval for this case.
Okay. Any other comments? I see Board Member Pitcher reaching.
I'll reach. You know, in looking at the restrictions and the fact that I think I heard that the tenant was an affiliate of the owner. I think, you know, some of this is they have control over who goes in there. So I mean, the fact that it's vacant is somewhat, you know, their own choosing. You know, the other thing I'm concerned about is, they're between Higley and Greenfield from Baseline North, there's 2,100 apartments just there. And I don't know if, you know, there's really necessarily a need that this one would solve if we've got some availability down south.
Board Member Sarkisian, please.
I guess, just again, looking at the history of the site and seeing what's around it and what's gone on. I mean, even to the south, I mean, Gilbert's done crazy stuff going on the west side, but even when you start looking in this portion, south of Baseline, it's stalling. Higley record dead ends into like Stillwell, IT Stillwell. So I feel, especially, I mean, it is a really great piece. I just feel like if it was in demand, it would, especially with everything going on, it would have kind of hit, or you'd have another application for it. I don't know that how many applications have come before on this site. So with this one, without there being, I think at this point, some of this stuff is getting cannibalized by the insanity that is going on Elliott Corridor, I think it's somewhat in close proximity mileage drive-wise, but, and I do think the housing shortage issue, and I mean, it's kind of gotten ridiculous, but, so for that, I would actually be in support of it because I don't see anything else coming before us at this time, and what is before us is this. And like I mentioned, I've been driving by us since 2003, and since the last development I've seen in this area was 2007, and then, well, 2010 was the YMCA, which is affiliated with the school. But U-Haul's been there since 2004. There's nothing that's been pushing this for growth in that sense. So that's my concern, is that we're waiting for something that's not incentivized enough to go here, despite how much we want it to be there.
Okay. Well, I'll just share my thoughts. I'm persuaded, I guess, by Board Member Pitcher. I think that the owner of the property has within its control the ability to market this property in a way that could have it be developed. I think we have an item on our agenda today that recommendation that we approved was that it be continued to the later September meeting. But that's a large project, and as Director Apia said, that, you know, it's not just, we shouldn't just focus as narrowly on medical here. I mean, it's an employment parcel. It's large. It's a large area for employment. I spent 10 years on economic development before coming here, so I'm very invested in economic development in Mesa and in preserving areas that we have for employment. And as I indicated earlier, since I've been on the board here, we've approved many multi-family housing projects. So it's not any aversion. I understand the issues with the demands for housing, but again, for me, it's about right place, right time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this item, and we'll see if I get a second on it. Board Member Montez, before I do that, is there anything you wanted to say or add to the discussion?
Well, I know housing is needed. I just was speaking, I know Banner on Power and, my goodness, between Main and Broadway.
Right.
Yes, I know that I had spoken to them because my school's in that area, and I know that many of the nurses there and hospital employees are traveling from other cities to go and work there, and they're lacking housing in our area. And so a part of me is, I think, if our housing is if they are working there or near Banner or any of those hospitals, but they're living in other cities, that doesn't bring us an economic value, right? Because they're not shopping in our town, they're living in other areas. So a part of me, I'm kind of thinking, I mean, I'm new here, so it's my first time, but I could see the benefit of having housing. My other question would be, I don't know the apartments near there. Are they are they at capacity? Do students use those apartments? Like, I would want some numbers in looking at that, because there's apartments right there, but I'm not sure. Are they at capacity? Do they have a waiting list?
Fully occupied.
Oh, fully occupied.
And unfortunately, we've closed the public hearing part of this.
Okay.
That's okay.
It's okay.
So,
Okay,
this
so
is our chance.
Those
to
are kind of
discuss it, but
what I'm looking at.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move this item. So I would move item 4E, which is case ZON 22-00431, District 2, within the 5,700 to 5,900 blocks of East Baseline Road, within the 1,800 to 1,900 blocks of South Sunview, and within the 5,700 to 5,900 blocks of East Inverness Avenue, located west of Wrecker Road on the north side of Baseline, rezoned from Planned Employment Park and Planned Area Development Overlay and Council Use Permit to multiple residence 5 with a Planned Area Development Overlay and Site Plan Review. This request will allow for a multiple residence development. The staff recommendation is denial. So I will move approval of this item and ask if there's a second.
I second that.
Could you make,
Approval of their recommendation.
I'm recommending approval of this item with the recommended denial from staff. So the effect would,
Okay, so could you make a motion either to approve or to recommend denial?
well,
Just-
I recommend denial.
Okay, thank you.
Which is the staff recommendation here. And then,
And I second that.
so we have a first and a second, and we'll go ahead. Are we ready for the vote? I guess we are. Let's go ahead and vote. Board Member Allen?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 3 yes votes, 3 no votes, with 1 board member absent. So I'll turn to our attorney, and I guess, what do we do now?
So to pass any motion, you need a quorum of those present. So to pass any motion, you need 4 votes. You could make another motion, but I assume, based on the outcome of this, it ends up 3-3 as well. So when it goes to city council, it's going to be recorded on their agenda as a split 3-3.
Split vote. Okay. All right, well, thank you for the vote on that, and I'll turn it to Rachel. Is there anything else that we need to address on our agenda today?
Chair, board members, no, there's nothing.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn our public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, are you ready to vote? Board Member Allen, what's your vote?
Yes.
All right, by your vote of 6 ayes with 1 absent, you've approved the motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben says, my bad, I should have been there to vote. Yeah, Ben, show up for once.
Yeah, well, he would have been the deciding vote.
Exactly.
Or someone would have been the deciding vote.